For more analysis on the current situation in Gaza, we're joined from Ramallah by the writer and researcher Ahmed Zakarneh. Welcome, sir, to Qnews. Firstly, sir, let's start off by asking how crucial is Egypt's role in pushing for a ceasefire that protects Palestinian lives and ensuring humanitarian access to aid?
Good evening to you and to the viewers. In fact, the Egyptian role is central and essential, as Egypt has sought from the very beginning to a ceasefire and to put an end to this war at any cost. Especially that these tensions are related directly to the Egyptian national security, and Egypt has always been with the first presence in handling the Palestinian cause, as it perceives it a national cause. The Egyptian presence is essential, and Egypt is highly concerned with the deterioration of Gaza security-wise, and the reactivation of these demonic schemes proposed by Trump or by the Israeli government regarding the displacement of the Gazan population. This was rejected since day one by Egypt, and this can never be compromised. And so Egypt is playing an integral role, as the Palestinian people have high hopes in the Egyptian role.
Okay, now, sir, given the staggering death toll, what more can the international community do to hold the Israelis accountable for the civilian deaths in Gaza, whether it be, through judicial systems or reparations to the Palestinian people?
The only guarantee that can be provided and depended upon is a real will, and this is at the hand of the US side, Egypt and Qatar as the mediators, and the entire Arab group, including Saudi Arabia, can actually have a role in practicing pressure on the United States to oblige Israel to commit to these agreements and to go forward with the deal to discuss a comprehensive end to the war.
Yes, but sir, what about the Israelis themselves? Will the international community hold them accountable for these actions?
The international community is already starting in this regard to hold Israel accountable, but the international community that we talk about right now is the streets, the Western public. The governments are still swaying between condemnation and standing silent before the Israeli actions and crimes. The European Union has not yet taken a real stance. We have seen Spain taking very good steps, Norway as well, but we are waiting for the other states such as France and the UK to recognize the Palestinian state. And this will highly contribute alongside with the Saudi and Egyptian rules and efforts to have an international alliance that was delayed after the Iranian war. The condemnation and the condemnation stances can be actually translated on the ground to oblige Israel to commit to stopping the genocide war, as no one is now having a discussion of it being a genocide or not. It is a genocide under the recognition of different international institutions.
Okay, now moving on, how can mediators ensure that the Palestinian demands, especially those regarding the reconstruction, lifting blockade, are fully included in the agreement and the free access to humanitarian aid?
The US side is highly concerned for different reasons related to the US domestic politics and to its role in the region, the Middle East region. And by the Trump's pressures practiced against the far right trend in Israel, we might see some results. Trump himself is trying to take Netanyahu away from the scene of trial, and he's trying to provide safe haven and not hold Netanyahu accountable before the far right trend inside Israel. And this might help, especially in the humanitarian protocol and in concluding this deal and seeing it through and putting an end to the war.
Okay, now, sir, the Israelis have notoriously been known to break ceasefires like we've seen in the past. What mechanisms could be introduced to monitor and enforce a ceasefire to truly safeguard the Palestinian civilians on the ground?
There are no mechanisms except the UN Security Council, where the United States always use the right of veto, and therefore the United States must have some balance in its stances, and they are the only state able today to exert real pressure on Israel. For the United States or the US administration to do so, the Arab group and the European Union must pressure the United States, and especially using the economic dimension, because Trump and his administration are always about economy, and they pay a lot of attention to this specific dimension, which is completely related to what happens to the US interests in the Middle East. And the ball now is the EU and the Arab world's court.
How significant, sir, is the unified stance of the Palestinian factions in strengthening the negotiation position as well as protecting Palestinian rights?
This is a very important question, because the reasoning of Israeli negotiations is based on an attempt to take what's political and convert it into a religious matter, and taking the religion always to the negotiation table. That's why we find Israel always evading and dealing from a state of superiority, not only in the Palestinian issue, but with all issues related to the Arab world. This reasoning of Israel, this religious reasoning, turns politics into a Torah or religious discussion, or what's called in the Israeli doctrine the sacred blackmail. This has a lot of historical dimensions, which makes the Arab side, specifically the Palestinian side, obliged and to actually have some unity, as unity is key to confront such negotiation behavior. The Arab world must realize that and contribute to support the Palestinian negotiator.
Okay, so you spoke a little bit about the international bodies, making Israelis accountable, but what role can an international legal body play when it comes to investigating the alleged war crimes or the war crimes and preventing future aggressions against Gaza? Could we see trials like we've seen in other genocides?
The international bodies are still tied to the politics of member states, and these institutions are taking strong steps forward. Of course, there are US threats to these organizations, but the taken measures by the ICJ and the ICC are highly significant, are very necessary. and it's important to hold on to these measures, and they should be supported, and the alliances must mobilize upon these decisions to fight wars around the globe. And this actually happened by the hen organization, the pardon, the child hen who was martyred deliberately, and the Israeli troops, the which is the killer who kills civilians deliberately, is the only one who should be held accountable, and the international community must hold them accountable and ensure non-impunity of perpetrators of such crimes.
So, sir, what about the access to humanitarian aid? Now, this is one of the sticking points here. What concrete steps should be taken immediately to ensure the unrestricted access to humanitarian aid in the Gaza Strip?
One of the terms or amendments set by the Hamas movement in this context is ensuring an unhindered access of humanitarian aid through UN bodies and Red Crescent and the Red Crescent Association, and not this foundation, this US-backed foundation, which is entirely not humanitarian and not American. It's completely Israeli, and it's a complete death trap. The international community now is holding to the humanitarian role and to be the ones in charge of distributing aid. Not to mention the quantities that must be entered on a daily basis, away from any kind of blackmail practiced by the Israeli side.
Okay, from Ramallah, that was the writer and researcher Ahmed Zakarneh. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on Q News.